Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Critical Podcast. I'm your host, Jimmy Good, and joining me today is a very special guest, Mr. Adam Lawson. Adam, how you doing?
Hey, how are you, Jimmy? Good to be on the show.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show. And for some people who might not know Adam has been doing quite a lot of stuff. You guys might know him from the YouTube series Escape the Night, or maybe Spell Slingers, or maybe Tabletop. He's a director, a writer. He kind of produces. You're kind of a man of many talents over there. But, today we're going to be talking about something very specific. We're going to get to it in a moment. But Adam, I want to get into who you are to start off. Because here at Critical Reviews, we like to talk about just all the stuff we love. Movies, games, TV, theme parks, music, all that stuff. So, what are your favorite things that come to mind when it comes to media? What is that stuff that's inspired you?
Yeah, I mean, when I think, my very first recollections of what inspired me in regards to cinema, I think my earliest recollection, what I wanted to be was a Marine when I was, in the second grade, right? And then in the fourth grade, my next door neighbor, who is an amazing dude, he said, "Hey, there's this book called Dragons of the Autumn Twilight." And it's by Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman, and it's this called the Dragonlance Chronicles. And I read this book, and my whole life came alive with this fantasy novel. And it's kind of a sappy, fantasy tale, but I came to life in a way that my whole life sort of pivoted at that point of oh, I get this magic of make-believe and fantasy and storytelling. And I would sit in my room and I would read those books, and I would sometimes read a scene and then act it out in my mind afterwards and emphasize certain emotion or add dialogue to it. And then after that, we started playing Dungeons and Dragons. So maybe there's a big thank you to Gary Gygax. So we started playing Dungeons and Dragons, which then furthered that love of fantasy and storytelling and make believe. And so that began the next segue. And then I think this next discovery after that was I did theater starting in the 8th grade. I did lots and lots and lots of plays. And also at that time I was getting into comic books.
Nice.
And my role-playing game universe was expanding. And I think, the journey was I think the first comic book that I think on that I can remember that hit me the most was Chris Claremont and Jim Lee's Wolverine, X-Men, sorry. And I just think of his character in that so much. But that I remember reading those books and seeing Jim Lee's art, and it made it more come to life even more, right? Because he took him from comics from a golden age look to this hyper real, nothing quite like his pencils. I still to this day, anytime I see a Jim Lee pencil, or Jim Lee work, it hits me. And definitely my art tastes have broadened beyond that, but I still love it. When I think of Hush, when I think of his collaboration with Jeff Loeb, and I think about his collaboration with Brian Azzarello at different times, it's like those pencils just have left an impression. So that started to sort of shape my interest in love and art as well. And so I kind of had this trifecta going on of role-playing games, theater, and comic books, if you will. And I think I don't give enough credit to this group of role-playing games called White Wolf. But they have this series of games, Mage, the Ascension, Werewolf, Vampire, and those helped shape, I think, maybe my interest in sort of darker tales. I think I would owe that to them. And so then that and then maybe novelists along the way, right? It was, this series of fantasy novels, and then it was Stephen King as well. I guess I owe a large piece there. But then I realized, probably by the time I was 13 or 14, I had a low probability of becoming a mutant. Maybe 15, it really settled in on me, because I was they develop in puberty.
Yeah. So
early on, I was like, well, there's a chance maybe, right? And I grew up a very religious kid, and so we would do fasting once a month, right? We would fast and pray. And my fasting and prayer would always be, can I please become a mutant?
Yeah.
Can I gain superpowers? That prayer went on for a couple of years before I realized It's probably not going to happen for me. And then that's when that broadened out to writing and the idea of creating stories about fantastical things in a real world, right? And then I realized, that's the thing you can make a living at, and that's actually the thing that is real, is playing make believe, not the make believe part.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of that was the journey. And I think very early on, I was 21. I was directing commercials, local crappy commercials in Utah, and then moved to Los Angeles 23 and was working in the indie movie scene. And I did a series of movies. Some of them won Oscars even, and I had a really great ride. And at that time, I was also, like you mentioned, sort of a man for all seasons. I was always writing, but I was, first AD. I was a line producer. I was a producer. I really worked a gamut. I'd produced indie movies. I'd written movies. And in fact, one of my first kind of, I would say a breakthrough, maybe not to the world, because the movie maybe didn't have outrageous success, but a breakthrough for me was I wrote this movie that got retitled later called A Game of Assassins. It's a Lionsgate movie, and I was 28 years old, and I wrote this film, and it got sold, and we went and we shot this in China.
That's so cool.
You're right, and it was I still have never forgotten the moment of coming to set. In China, when they film, the crew lives at the stage. They have like dorms, and the crew moves in.
Wow.
So it's really a special thing, and I love the East so much. And I think being there, we speak about China now, and it's kind of tainted with COVID, but unfortunately, because I have such a love of China. But I remember being there, and the crew was all standing in front of the stage. And when I came there, they said, "Hey, what are we going to shoot today?" And this idea of actors saying my words and this story that was kind of like this survival movie in hell, if you will. It was like I just sort of wept, that these ideas that I had concocted that were my own, they were not based on anybody else's work, that they would connect with others, mm-hmm. and that they would work. And so that was really like the sign, because I was very good at facilitating, and I was, successful at producing. But that was the first feedback, even though it'd been years and years of like, what you have in your head, other people are interested in and connect with. Maybe not everyone, because maybe no one can do that, but that was really a pivotal moment for me. And it also created my love of the East.
Yeah.
Still to this day.
Totally. Oh, for sure. Well, my gosh, that's a really good rundown. Oh my goodness. That's very detailed. I love it. Okay. I have a few questions because there's so much in there. So let's do basic questions first, and then we're going to get back to China. But first question, Dungeons and Dragons. I got to know, what's your favorite monster?
I mean, when I think about that question of the favorite monster, I think there's sort of three that come to me, right? And I think of Tiamat as the most cool, fantastical thing, the five-headed dragon, right? Mm-hmm. And then I think of the Terraskew as this legendary 330 hit points, at least back in second edition, and now maybe it has more. As the ultimate monster of all time. And then maybe if I were to say the third thing is a beholder was the thing that always was the most mysterious or creepy, the floating single eye, mm-hmm. with the tentacles in the mouth. So maybe those are the three that I think of.
Dang, that's good, man. I always just go back to Owlbear, but then again, I always wanted an Owlbear pet, but yes. The DM I would work with, he was like, well, that's a level 7 or whatever monstrosity, and he's like, that's not going to happen. I'm like, but Owlbear is such a cool concept, because you got werewolf, and you got these werebears, but Owlbear? That's so weird. I loved it. Okay, you used to pray for getting mutant powers. I gotta know, what mutant powers were you hoping for, if any at all? Was there anything specific that you're like, if I could get this, I'd be set?
Yeah, there was lots of negotiating in those prayers. There was a lot of negotiating about what I could accept. You know what I mean? I think one of the maybe most common ones was Colossus. If you remember that character from the X-Men.
He's amazing.
Or the most amazing, because I always felt when I was a kid, and sometimes I still think it now, when I would be in danger or the threat of danger, or I'd go to the dentist and there was a threat of pain, I would imagine I was Colossus and then nothing could hurt me, right? Because I had the omnium skin and I would be protected.
Yes.
And so I think maybe that was the one the most, because then I would never have to be afraid.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's a great pick. I love Colossus because in the first X-Men Legends game that came out a long time ago, I remember playing through that with some buddies, and I played Colossus most of the entire time, and he was so much fun, which people think he's pretty basic, and he is, but he's got such a cool backstory. He's just, like you said, that kind of omnium skin, like the ability to kind of get in there and just like do the work. I don't know. He's wonderful. I think he's kind of underrated, and I love to see some better representation or more of him in the future films. So here's hoping, right?
Yeah, I agree. And he was always the guy that like got taken out quickly in any big fight because he was predominantly stronger than the others. So they were always like, okay, he's taken out, and now it's Wolverine and so on and so forth.
Yep. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah,
exactly. Totally. Yeah, that's so true. Now, okay, jumping back to China, that sounds so cool. So, you said getting on there, working with everybody who moved like in, like the cast and the crew living there together. Did you find, because obviously you've worked on other things now, did you find that there was kind of a cohesion there that you don't get in other places because everyone was kind of like forced to be together? Or was it like stressful in different ways? Like, what was that like?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there isn't a finer work ethic than Chinese work ethic that I have yet to really match. I mean, I've shot in Japan as well, and maybe that's the other equal.
Oh, cool.
Like Japan has maybe the equal work ethic, and also like a aesthetic that you can't really beat. Maybe that's, but yeah, I mean, so that's hard to compete with. And yes, there was a camaraderie because it was like summer camp, and in this summer camp, you made a movie.
Yeah.
So there was something really thrilling about that. I mean, like Escape Tonight, there is a deep family because we're in it. It's so hard to make that show. It's a 250-person crew. Things are all happening real time. The stress level on that shoot, in the few weeks of shooting that, are far greater than all the other shoots in the whole year times 5. It's outside of that because the demand is so high because it's moving real time. The pressure, it's like all the pressure of a live show, but your star is unrehearsed, plus all the pressure of filmmaking, and then a really tight time frame because of the YouTubers' availability. So that kind of bonds us in a way, and in a special way where usually most everyone has a breakdown or two because the pressure's so much. There's lots of crying and and screaming, but there is great joy on what we make. And maybe sometimes in life, you don't know your own limits and you need someone else or something else to push you to them. And I think that was the joy of Escape Tonight, right? It's like the show you did so that the rest of the year you had something to talk about.
Yeah. That's a really good way to put that. I love it. I've been watching something recently, and kind of the motto of that show is like push past your limits. So you saying this right now, I'm like, yeah, that's exactly right. So that's really cool. So it sounds like you've worked on some like pretty intense stuff, which is interesting. And now, because we've been kind of stuck at home for the most part, it has kind of brought back this other project that you've been working on for a while. And it's funny because we have been in the past on this show, for people who've been listening for a long time, we've been promoting this thing, or we have been for a long time, or we did for a while ago. And I was wondering, I was like, oh, because Joran was kind of talking to me about this, and he was like, I'm working on this project, and here's kind of the blurb about it. And I remember like reading it, and I was like, this sounds so interesting. And now finally getting to see it, and that is obviously the comic The Eighth. And obviously I want to get into that with you today. And I was privileged enough, thank you for letting me read the first issue there, because I was kind of like going through it, and I was like, wow. Obviously, I love Joran Ever's artwork because pretty much all the artwork you see on the channel is Joran Ever's stuff. But it was so cool to see that, and then also like get into this really dark and gritty tale that kind of subverted some of the expectations I have as someone who's a big like superhero fan, because I was like, okay,
Right.
like I'm sure I'll know where this is gonna go, and I didn't, and I was like, wow, so it went in some pretty dark places. But the eighth, like, where did that come from? Like, it's something you've been working on for a couple of years now, right?
Yeah. So Joran and I, Joran started doing storyboards for me on season 1 of Escape the Night, and I just found him on our art station. I really liked his work, and I liked the way his stuff has a slight cartoonish element to it, but it's not all the way.
Yeah.
But it's like cartoonish, but it's also sexy, and the character expressions are really vivid, and the action has such a great feel. And so that's when I started talking to Joran about doing it with me, and he said, "Great, I would love to do it." And it took, I think the first issue took longer than anything else by virtue of building the color palette, because I took Joran's initial instincts and then we pushed it much farther. He and I spent a lot of time working out the color, so it had that great grittier look to it that feels a little bit more the way the colors work, how they have like the darker and brighter spots in it, so that it felt I think just more our tale. So you got his like slightly cartoonish look in a dark setting with this painterly backgrounds. And so I think it gave you what our story is, right? Which is both violent and vulnerable, right?
That's a great way to put it.
You're like, oh, right. Like, oh, here I am. I feel like I know where this is going, but then you don't. And it left hooks you, and it does it, all the way through, the issues. And so I think there's two thoughts I had about that story that really came to me. The first one was, I guess this is where it began. Maybe the very first place it began was having seen a lot of bullying when I was young in school. Tragic bullying that resulted in, people's lives ending shorter than they should. And so, and people I cared for. And so I think it maybe started there. And then the other thought I had when I was watching a Spider-Man film, and Spider-Man is great and I love him. But when Spider-Man, he can lift a tank, right? You see him lift a tank in one issue, and then you see him punch just a thug, right? And he punches the thug with all the energy he's got and knocks him out. But if Spider-Man punched a thug, he wouldn't knock him out.
Yeah.
He'd shatter the skull into 1,000 pieces and he'd have killed him. So Marvel, in a way, lies to you. They lie and they say you can lift a tank and you can punch a guy and there's no consequences. They remove the consequences of what it really means to have strength and power. And that's what I consider the comic book lie.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
That's passed on so that we can kind of keep it friendly and fun. And I thought about that, and I thought, what if in this tale a 16-year-old, 17-year-old had power that was there's no rule book for how to be a superhero or how to manage that kind of power, especially for a teenager, right? A teenager who's full of lots of emotions and insecurities. And in this case, our character, his brother's committed suicide and his mother has not been able to really recover from it, right? And so he feels like his life is out of control, and his brother committed suicide as a result of incessant bullying, right? And so that kid has a lot of turmoil inside. So when he gets the power to fight back, and it's a power that it's not strong like Schwarzenegger strong, it's strong like impossible, inhuman, like a machine. He's not going to just knock the guy out and he goes to jail, right? He's going to make decisions because he's not even going to know the consequences, and they're going to be terrifying. That's the real story, right? That's the part that they omit in MCU. And I said, well, what if this tale, they didn't? That the consequences of saving the day were real. That the body count really piles up, like it really would. Like you plow through New York City with an alien spacecraft and knock over buildings. Oh, we got everybody to safety. But you don't really.
Yeah.
Thousands of people are actually, the body count is insane. And we hide it. So I thought, well, let's play it for keeps.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what started this tale. And then the titling of the eighth came from ancient Sumerian mythology. I think for myself, when I reach for mythologies, I like to go into the past instead of the future. And there's these 7 sages that came from the gods that imparted to humans the intelligence, like the 7 various skills: math, reasoning, etc. But then what wasn't recorded in history was that there was an 8th sage, right? And this sage was actually, that mantle was given by this armor. And this sage's job was like a destroying angel. Right? The others were to enlighten, and the other ones was to cleanse. And so in our tale, David and Emma and Atticus find a piece of that armor, right? And I liked that because they didn't find a complete thing. They found a piece of it. Just like themselves, they only know a piece of who they are. And they're going to then take this journey to find the other pieces of the armor and the other pieces of themselves.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, I was going to say, I think that's such an interesting thing, because when I was reading that, sometimes in these types of comic books, like I can kind of, again, like we said before, I understand where it's going a little bit, but that's not true with this. And then also kind of getting into this mythos, which I'm very unfamiliar with. And I was like, oh, this is something different that I'm not really used to. And maybe this has been covered in other things before, but it was newer to me. So I was like, oh, this is interesting. And you also said that too, because they say like, oh, this is a piece of it, because usually in things like this, like your Venom symbiote, for example, like that is like a full thing when, Peter gets it. It's not like his left leg is black and he's like, well, and I kick people with this one, it kills people. Like, no, it's like, right. It's like a full thing right off the get-go. So this kind of has this like thought of, okay, we've got a piece of it. I can put it, on my arm. I can put it somewhere else on me, and, it's going to change me, but I don't have it where it's like, well, I can just completely cover myself in it and be like max level right away. And that kind of reminds me, like, it's almost anime style, which I appreciate, where it's right. Like you gotta build to get to that power. It's not like, here's all the power you have possibly and all of your potential is right here. It's like, no, there's some time here, until we get back to the real root of it. Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So that's really cool.
And I think there's an evolution to him in this process to himself personally and to the power.
Yeah. Okay. So were there any inspirations for this for you, or was this, obviously you talked about like your past and the bullying being a big focus, which I thought was really interesting, because sometimes they touch on it in comics and it's really quick, but this one like really focused in on it, which I thought was powerful. I thought right. that was a lot better, more accurate,
Right. That it's a haunting thing. And I know some people have said, hey, Adam, there's all these sort of dark things happening in this world, and how come parents aren't interceding? And I always makes me chuckle. And I said, that's somebody who wasn't bullied saying that.
Yeah.
Right. That's somebody who wasn't abused saying that, because they don't realize that for the person in it, there isn't somebody coming to help you.
Yeah.
So it seems all around you. And I wanted to create that sensation of their point of view of the world with it. And I think that, this first issue, really is the rocket ship, right? It's because it sets up the stage of all the broken pieces of these 3 characters, right? And then the issues that follow, it's them sort of reassembling those pieces and trying to repair them, and it takes a much different path as it leaves, without giving it away, as they journey past this first issue, right? Things really change in the way that the story unfolds. And I think that this was about, to give like the initial, like, here's the terrible thing that happened, and now we're going on this journey out to solve it. Yeah,
for sure. And it's the other thing that I think that's interesting too is you talk about this trio, and usually with groups like this, you have like, all right, you have the main protagonist, they get the powers, and the other ones are kind of hangers on, and they kind of are there for the cause, but they're not really in it as much. But that's not the case. Right. Like we get people who are like not only emotionally but physically scarred by some things that happen, and like they're kind of almost developing a persona alongside the main protagonist that is like kind of sinister, like, which is really cool, because I was like, okay, how are we gonna like make these characters even more than just kind of the sidekicks. And there
That's
clearly is more to it than that, which again, you don't really get, I feel like, when you have these beginning issues. Like you kind of just have like the one and they're like, all right, these are my friends, but they don't really know what's going on. But no, there's like a lot of transparency and a lot of like, this affects everybody. It doesn't just affect David. Like there's so much more going on here. So is there, like, for those friends, were those inspired by anyone? Do you know like people in real life? You're like, you've gone through things with me.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because those two friends, Atticus and Emma, right? So they they, like you're saying, their journeys become quite complicated, equally as rich and complicated as David's, and the things that they develop and are very different, but they all have the same sort of evolution going on from different sides. And I would say that Emma, it's interesting. Back in the day, I produced a music video for a band called The Sick Puppies. I produced a few music videos for that.
Oh yeah,
and the bass guitarist is a girl named Emma Onzai, and she's a Japanese mixed girl from Australia. And I think in making this the second video I made for them, I think ever since I saw her in that video and sort of the feeling that she captured, I wanted to put it into a character. And so Emma Onzai doesn't know this about Emma Adachi in the comic book, that is a bit of a reflection of her, and of her, I guess, who I imagined her on camera person to be, right? She's really a lovely person, but right. And then Atticus, I had a very good friend. His name's Isaac Apia from Ghana, a religious man. He's first generation here, and he's had his children here, and his wife's a doctor. And I thought, what would Isaac's son be like, right? And growing up with that kind of a background and those kind of a values, put into this place where Emma has kind of been grown up, so to speak, more on the streets, and then him with the more structured values, and then David in the middle. That's how they became to be. And I knew I wanted 3 characters to lead this story, and I knew I wanted them to surprise you, each one of them to surprise you in different ways.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah. And I get that, because there were times, especially with Emma early on, like we talked about, who is changing, but also she's got desires for things, and it doesn't always, like, it's not going to work out maybe that way that she wants. And it was like, okay, we already have a dynamic going between these 3. And then you've got Atticus, who seems like the voice of reason, who's just like, all right, guys, we're only going to do this for so long, and we can't do this forever. And he feels like the one out of the 3 that's getting kind of like really sucked into it in a way that he isn't like super stoked about. Like, he's like, oh my gosh, like, I don't want to do this. And he's like, did you guys see what happened? Like, the consequences? And the other 2 are kind of like, yeah, so what? Like, so
right.
I like that.
Is the Atticus is like, guys, this guy's not going to walk again. And then David, being altruistic, is like, yeah, but the bullying stopped. And Emma's like, who cares? I just wanted revenge.
Yeah.
Right. That those are their 3 feelings. Like, David is the altruist, that albeit somewhat disturbed altruist. And then Atticus is the voice of reason. And Emma is just like, actually, I'm not in it for the altruism. I'm just in it for the revenge. I just want to make people hurt for what they've done.
Yeah.
And so I like that chemistry mix between these people who cared for each other, but were essentially somewhat at odds with each other.
Yeah, well, I think, too, it really does a good job of allowing anybody who reads this to kind of gravitate towards one or the other. Because, like you said before, if you have someone who's going to say things like, well, I don't know why the parents aren't getting involved or whatever, they might fall a little closer in line to, like, looking at, like, more of an Atticus kind of view. Not that he is that way, but then there's other people who are like, I have been bullied, this is really horrible. They're going to like Emma a little bit more so. And then there's going to be just like straight rational people who are just going to be like, all right, let's just weigh it out quick. And those are the Davids. So they're going to be like, well, he might not walk again, but he'll never ruin anybody's life again. So that's pretty good. Like, people are like, so I think that's a really fun dynamic. Again, in the first issue, this isn't something that's like coming 5-10 issues in. Like, this is like right away, which again I
Right.
appreciate. There's a lot of ground to cover here, and you guys you
Yeah.
do it. And again, it's just the first issue. I was like going through it. I'm like, there's a lot here. Like this is really good. So and
Thank
again,
you.
it is really dark and gritty though. Like there's a when you look at it, because I'm so used to Yoren and his animation and everything, but his stuff usually, again, you kind of talked about the colors, maybe a little more muted compared to what he normally does, because he kind of, he'll saturate and he'll make things so bright and beautiful, but he'll try to tell a whole story with one image. But then seeing multiple things kind of go through, and again, the feeling of everything, there's a visceral nature to it that I think that really pairs well with your storytelling and Yoren's art style when you kind of marry the two together, because you like get these shots where you're like, oh gosh, like like that worked out because of that combination of the two things, which is really cool to see.
Yeah, that's right. I'm glad that is coming through, because I was really, really hopeful that that's how it would land, right? That people would, that they would see that, right? That they would see that, like that they would sense that mix, right? That like it's that art and that darkness putting together so it becomes palpable. There's that word.
Yeah, no, for sure. It totally comes through, for sure. And for a while when we would talk about it on the show, I think the things that I kind of gravitate towards, like, and this is not to kind of dumb it down or just to say, because I feel like we're in a world where everybody just kind of compares things to other things, but it's kind of like this fun marriage, a little bit of like Venom and Chronicle, and for movie fans and comic fans. And I really like that, because I feel like after I saw Chronicle, I thought, well, what would happen, if some younger kids got these superpowers, and maybe a few of them weren't like, let's just fight for the side of good, and one was like, yeah, I think I'm gonna like rip some people apart, like that is I think is way more interesting, and we do not get a lot of that. We really don't, and I think that's so cool.
No, I agree there is that people, when granted, lots of power and wealth, seldom do the right thing, and they seldom do the reactive thing.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, I agree.
Yeah, well, I really enjoyed this, and I'm excited to see where it goes. But this is the first issue, and you're trying to get it completely funded on Indiegogo and whatnot. So where can people go to help support this, and also watch this really cool trailer with the voice of Yuri Lowenthal, which a lot of people like myself will recognize as the voice of about 1 billion characters just from everything. If you've ever played a video game,
everything. Yes.
If you've ever seen an anime, he's in it. But where can people go to support this thing?
Yeah, so the place to go get this is to go to Indiegogo and look for the 8th comic, is what it is under, is just the 8th. And that's the place to go to get it. And essentially, here's what we've got for it. What's cool is Jordan and I have been working on it for the last couple of years, and I've just been paying him out of my pocket and getting this thing done, is we've completed 5 issues, and there's 3 more. It's an 8-issue story, 180 pages. And so everybody who backs it, whether you're a digital backer or hardcover or beyond, you get the first issue digitally the month after. As soon as the campaign closes, you get the first issue. And the next month you get second issue, and the next issue, just like you were collecting it at your comic book shop. And then hopefully by the time, not hopefully, we will be done after those first 5 months with the last 3 issues. And then we'll be ready to send it to printers, so you can jump right into the story world. So that's a cool thing about this campaign that I think is unique and is not done. And if you're not a digital reader, that's fine. That's fine too. So I would say the 3 perk level we have is, like I described, the monthly digital issues. Then we have the hardcover special edition, and this is where my heart is. And this is, you get the 180 page story, hardcover special edition with a beautiful slipcase. It was created on your coffee table. It's a collector's item, and it's super fun to read. And then you get that as well as the digital issues if you want to peruse a couple of them there just to whet your appetite, but you got that. And then the third tier is you get the hardcover, the digital, and you get the badass t-shirt. This is a t-shirt design that Yoren did, something he and I have worked on for quite a while, and it's this really cool impressionistic, maybe heralds a little bit to the Dark Knight t-shirt in gray with this silhouette of David and Emma that's intertwined, and super cool thing. And so those are the 3 tiers. and products you can get. We've got a cool stretch goals to emboss the book, another mini storyline, and we've got a few other things down the line, which we hope we get to. But we'll just be grateful if we get funded. And if we hit the funding goal, everyone will get this beautiful A4 embossed UV spotted print that Joran did of David in the middle of his transformation with the armor. So that's the place to find it. Come back it. If you think it's awesome, like Jimmy was saying, watch the animation. If you think it's awesome, back it. If maybe now you can back it, please share it on socials and get the word out, because people we don't, and we'd love to see it happen. And for the record, none of this money goes to me. It all goes to finishing the book and paying Joran to finish it off. It's truly a labor of love to see this story come to life.
Yeah. Oh, totally. And, for anyone who's hearing all of this, I will have it linked to, and you'll be able to find it, obviously, like on my Twitter and stuff like that as well. So please, and like you were saying, sharing it around, or really telling like a friend in person, or over the phone, I should say, because of these trying times, over the phone or on Zoom. If you're just like hanging out one night, you're on Zoom or on Skype and you're talking to your buddy, just be like, hey, I checked out this thing. It's be really cool. It's actually pretty different and dark and messed up, and I think it's going to be something interesting. So please go over there and check it out. If you've ever enjoyed any of the things that Joran has worked on, especially here for our show, go support him. That is a wonderful way to do so. So I love it. It's so cool to see this thing finally come to fruition, and you're making the best out of a bad situation right now, because you're like, all right, we're like kind of bringing this up, and we're gonna work back on this thing. Now. Yeah, right? Make things out of the darkness, man. That's all. That's what we're about. But yes, I love talking about this. And again, like as someone who's gotten to privileged, get to see the first issue, I'm like, I don't want to talk about too much, but I want to talk about a few things. So I had to get into a little bit. Well, thank you for talking about that. Again, everybody, that's the 8th on Indiegogo. And again, the link will be down there. So please go share it around, check it out. And seriously, the trailer, it'll get you, because you're like, listen to it. You're like, oh my gosh, this is it's all coming together. It's all coming together, as Kronk likes to say. Well, now we get to move into that segment of the show where we talk about the things we've been killing time with, or as I like to call it, time killers. Yes, that's right. We're moving into it. The games we've been playing, the movies we've been watching, TV shows we've been viewing. Now, Adam, I'm guessing you've had a slight bit more free time on your hands lately. Have you been doing anything, like consuming any media in this time?
Yes. So I would say the first thing I have is there's this new comic book publisher called TKO Studios, and I bought a few of their comics, and it's cool because they do oversized comics, and you can get them you get this full you get this box set, and then cool. In it are the issues, are the issues.
Dang,
so it's pretty cool.
Cool.
And so it's super cool place. So, but the thing that I've been reading is The Fearsome Dr. Fang, and it's this awesome Indiana Jones style adventure, globe trotting, but it's cool because it deals with for me, obviously, it deals with the treasures of Kublai Khan. So it's a cop from San Francisco, a French thief, and then this cool character, Dr. Fang, dealing with ancient lore of China.
Cool.
Which is, as for me, obviously, I have a love of China, so it's the perfect comic. So that's the comic I'm reading. The book I'm reading is by Joe Abercrombie. It's called Sharp Ends, and it's spectacular. I mean, he's my favorite fantasy novelist now. I guess I've read 8 of his books. Sharp Ends, Joe Abercrombie. And then on TV, obviously, my fiance and I went through Tiger King because it's just, you can't take your eyes off it. And then we've been watching Ozark as well, which is quite dark in comparison. And then on the gaming front, so I've also created a role-playing game that's coming out later this year. It's also a tabletop game called Asunder. And so I have a couple groups that play it with on Zoom. And so that has been fun. And then also my group with Yuri on D&D. So that's those have been my time killers, if you will.
That is so. I envy those time killers, especially the D&D stuff. That's so cool. I have to ask you though, fun. As a big fan of China and all that they make, how do you feel about Mulan? Are you excited about Mulan?
I've been very excited about Mulan for sure. I can't wait. You know what I mean? It's such an amazing China tale. deals with, I shouldn't say just China, it deals with, the Mongol and Chinese history so much. And it's a really compelling story. I was very saddened initially when Ang Lee didn't direct it because I love Ang Lee so much. But I'm very excited. The trailers seem engaging, and hopefully sometime in the future it gets released. I don't know what's going to happen. So, but yeah, definitely a film for me.
Yeah,
I would say.
I heard July 24th, maybe. We'll see. I could see why Disney was like, all right, we made this thing. We put a lot of money into it. We're not just going to put it right onto the streaming service. I get it, Disney. I understand you. It's just unfortunate because I saw that and man, I was so excited. It gave you kind of the Crouching Tiger feel a little bit where there's kind of more of that mysticism put in. I was like, oh man, this is going to be, and it looks so legitimate. They really, oh man.
I can't wait.
Oh yeah. And the music in the background, but they're not putting the songs in. It gives me goosebumps. Anyway, so for me, I've been watching a lot of the anime Black Clover, which I've just been sucked into lately. It's really good. It's your kind of classic shonen jump kind of anime. It's great voice acting though. And I find myself watching many, many episodes of it, and they do kind of subvert a few of the classic, I should say, shonen jump anime archetypes or stereotypes. Because there's you can, with most of those shows, you can be like, all right, main protagonist, his rival, the big bad, you can kind of see where everything's going to be. But this one kind of shifts it up a bit. And I appreciate that. I've also been trying to catch up on My Hero Academia. I've been waiting for all of the English dub because I've just been sucked into, again, the voice acting there. I know some purists out there watch with the subtitles stuff, but the English voice acting, and specifically Chris Sabat, who plays All Might, my gosh, that guy, he just makes me and he's also in Black Clover. He's just, I love him. Just listening to him play these very different roles. I'm it's so good. So I've been indulging in some anime lately because I was I'm going to do the 2-week trial on Funimation. And then I'm all right, I'm going to do a 2-month. I'm just going to get into it for a while because we're kind of stuck. So I'm all right, we're watching a lot of that. And been watching a bunch of Disney stuff for an upcoming video. So I've been going through a bunch of the old Disney kind of classic animated films, which classic is a term that most people will kind of you'll be is Snow White classic? Is Aladdin classic? I'll just say all of the Disney animated films. So I've been kind of going back through there. And man, some of that animation is just, we moved to CG and I understand where the love from that comes and there's an efficiency to it. But there's something about those old animated movies that it's just still so striking, and there's so much passion and feeling in every frame. You look at it, you're wow, somebody took it with their hand and they're mm-mm, and then they just moved it just a little bit, and it's just man, it's so good. It's so good.
There's something special, right, about that. It's why I like anime too. I CG anime, I just dodge
me
a
too.
Bullet. I just dodge like a bullet. I'm oh, you did it in CG, bro. I already got that. I got that other places. I'm coming for you to go back to that.
Right? Adam, thank you. Because there's been a few times where people are you got to watch this thing. And then I start it in the first minute. It's all the CG stuff. I'm what? No, please no.
No, I don't, it's fine. I'll watch Pixar for that, but I've come for this for something else.
Yeah, which I've heard, for instance, the Dragon Prince is super duper good. It's from the guys who made The Last Airbender and everything. But it's the CG stuff, and it's I was guys, you made The Last Airbender, the closest thing to Western anime we've got. And I was and then you made Book of Korra and all that stuff, or Legend of Korra, and now it's don't do this. Please just bring it back. I know it's harder. I know it's harder. It's
Are you watching Beastars?
I saw that pop up. I have not yet. Is it good?
It's cool. It's very cool. And I also watched another one. I love Devilman.
Yeah, Crybaby.
I loved that as well. So yeah, I'm with you too. I need to see it in 2D to really, at least for me, that's what that art form is, right? That's what that experience is.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah. Well, there's something too when there's just so much feeling, and I love it. I just love anime, and there's something about it that still gets the goosebumps, raises the hair when you just get that moment where it all kind of it all just clicks, and you look sometimes especially in anime, what's fun too, unlike CG, is that you'll get it seems like a different group in, or for a fight scene, something will change. So the art looks kind of different, and you start to see these characters in an almost kind of mythical state. And you're wait, what am I? It's a hyper reality, which I really enjoy. So it's Man, but yeah, I'm a big sucker for anime. But that's just who I am, man. That's never enough, never enough.
No. It's
Well,
awesome.
let's move into the last segment of the show, my favorite segment, which is community feedback and questions. This one comes in from Missile Mage, and it's just for you, Adam. He asks us on Discord. He says, "What do you personally find the hardest part of working on a comic? Do you find it rewarding the whole way through, or is it only when the work is completed you can enjoy having made it?"
Here's what I would say to that is that musicians who just like whose the favorite part is the concert don't sell albums. The directors whose favorite part is sitting in the theater watching it with the audience and getting accolades don't direct movies. And the same is true with comic books. You need to love the process more than the outcome, because you spend the bulk of your time in the process and very little time with the outcome. And so I would say for myself, it's just as exciting to write it, to get the roughs back from Joran and give notes and make changes, as it is to see the finished. They're all different feelings, but I think that at least hopefully the intent is that you love that part as much as the other part. You love, getting the roughs back as much as you love an audience member connecting with it. They're all different things. But I think that's, for me at least, those are all satisfying. I think it's the same way in my TV work. It's so satisfying on set, and it's so magical when you see an audience light up about it. But you don't get to see the audience light up if you don't love the grueling hours.
Yeah.
So that's what I would say.
Yeah, and what was the hardest part, especially for this one for you? Was it the concept? Was it just like kind of getting? So I know for me sometimes it's just like just starting. You're just like, I gotta like launch into it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting you said, Jimmy, because I think the hardest part about it, I think initially, if you can imagine this, I wrote the 8th once, had a different artist do it besides Joran. Did the first issue, some things came up in their life and they were unable to finish, and so I threw it all away and started over with Joran to complete it, which the other artist was wonderful and did great work, but I think Joran's work was the best for this series. And I love Joran so much. He's such a great partner. I couldn't have a better. So I'm grateful for it. But so I think, was issue 1 was just getting what this looks like and feels like on paper, because it took me 2 tries.
Yeah.
I built the whole comic book first with a whole artist, did all 30 pages. Joe and I added a couple to it to make it 32, but that was the hardest part.
Yeah. Oh, that makes perfect sense, and I can understand on something like this, which is already kind of a Herculean task, because like it's a passion project that you're putting time into. That isn't like, it's not like some studio's like, hey, here's the time and the money you need to do this thing. It's like, no, I'm doing this kind of like for myself and for something special, and then to have that like thing be like kind of swept out from underneath you, and you're like, like just like it really, right? I bet it was like a stab. You're just like, okay, like, is this something that's really going to get done? But that's good, because I think failure, if you even call it that with this, it just tests your mettle, and you wanted to make this thing, and now you've made it, and now it's going to be better than what it was going to be, which is so cool.
Failure is just another rewrite.
Exactly. Yeah, it's not no. Failure is not no. That's what I've learned too. It's not no. It just means that like, all right, we just said it gets you closer to yes. That's what I'm thinking. That's the way I look at it. That's so cool, man. Oh, I'm sorry though. That's kind of heartbreaking though, because I'm sure there was a time where you're like, oh my gosh, like it's like, well, this isn't going to happen now. So did it change, by the way? Was it going to be this? You said you added a few more pages and stuff. I
added a couple more pages to just enhance the story a little bit, but it's very similar. Page 1 to what the original artist did and what Joran did as far as page layout, etc. There's a lot of similarities.
Okay.
Because it was just easiest for page 1, and then obviously for issue 1, because it had been so many drafts and reworking it with the other artist, it really refined the story, and so Joran just added more to it.
Yeah.
But yeah, the 2 pages just enhanced some bits. It's like where it shows them finding the actual heart. That page didn't exist in there initially, and then we added another page that just developed Emma and David's relationship more. It just needed a little bit more sort of breathing, I would say.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Well, it's pacing, just like, with like TV and movies and stuff. Like you look at things and sometimes things are moving too fast, and you look at it, and you're like, all right, this is kind of like breakneck speed. Let's give it a little bit of time to, I don't know, cultivate something even more so. Well, that's cool. That's great. So look, there's already a boon to it. There's even more. So guys, look at that. You're getting even more than what you were originally looking forward to. And that's so cool. Like I just love hearing about stuff like that, because you hear that with some really cool projects sometimes, where you hear about like kind of the things that happen in the background. Because like for us, not hearing about things and then just having it come out, you're like, well, this must have been just like the easiest thing. There's like a beautiful concept here and like the art and everything. But you're like, no, man, there's a history to it. Just like you look at Star Wars. Star Wars had a bunch of problems, and they still managed to overcome all of that. And that's like one of the biggest things in the world. So it just shows you that problems in the creative process do pop up, and usually things become better for it. Or at least that's the way I look at it. That's what I try to tell myself when something doesn't go right in my very, very, very minute version of anything that anybody makes. I'm like, oh, this screwed up. Dang it, I have to like remake this thing. But it's like, it's okay. It's all right. I'm passionate about it. I love it. And like you said, you got to love the grueling hours. You got to, because if you don't, no one else is going to love the final product.
That's right.
Well, that's a great question. And if anybody else listening to this ever has a question for the show, a topic, or whatever else, all you have to do, you can tweet at me. I'm at JimmyGood013 or at GoCritical. Just tweet the hashtag Critical Podcast. Hit me up sometime. But if you want to talk to Adam, if you want to go on Twitter and talk to him, where can they find you?
Oh, so they can find me on Twitter at Failed Superhero. They can also find me at Failed Superheroes Club on Facebook. And they can also find me on Instagram at Failed Superheroes Club as well.
That's great. That's okay. So why Failed Superhero, by the way? I wanted to ask you that.
Because I think that was what happened, once I realized, after my prayers were not leading to me becoming a mutant, that I had formed a club of failed superheroes, those who it didn't work for.
Yeah, well, that's okay, because now you're doing something. You're making superheroes in a different way, or maybe they weren't. I guess maybe in the 8th, I don't know if you call them superheroes, but they're heroes for something. So that's so cool, though. That's such an interesting handle. Mine was just my name with like my favorite numbers, so that's you've got me beaten there. I was like looking at that, I was like, failed superheroes. Like I gotta ask him about this because it's such an interesting handle. I was like, okay, yeah. Well, again, Adam, thank you so much for being on the show. It's been a real pleasure. And for anybody, like I said, again, if you want to go support Adam and Yoren, go check out that link at Indiegogo, the 8th. Please go and just watch it. Enjoy the trailer and everything. It's going to be something that you really, for me, I consumed a lot of this type of media. I haven't seen anything quite like this. So please go check it out. And again, Adam, I appreciate you being on, man. It's been such a pleasure to talk to you. It's been so fun.
Likewise.
Yeah, well, I hope...
Well, thank you.
Yeah, well, I hope maybe we can have you back on again someday and talk more about, like, the launch and stuff, because I really want to support this thing, because obviously it's something I'm passionate about. Yoren has been a friend for a long time, and it's been so cool. So thank you. And, yeah, well, everybody, thank you for listening in. We appreciate it. If you want to support us, you know how to do that. And until next time, just remember to adapt and overcome.
Thank you.